Hey musical scientists, welcome to my new room. Look how YouTube-y it is. I've got the colored lights, I've got the cubby with the things in it, like the signs and the books to show that I'm knowledgeable, and I've got the YouTube logo up there, but subtly so you know that I'm a YouTuber, but you don't think I'm too full of myself. Anyways, welcome to this space. Just moved in. It's looking pretty good. The studio's really not set up yet, but I'm working hard on the new song. I've been reading many books about, well, if you've been following my Twitter, you know probably what the song is and also what it's about. So we're back finally with another episode of Science Life. This is a conversation that I filmed when I was still back at my previous place, and it's one of my favorite conversations I've ever done, I think. As you can see by the title, I talked with Sean Carroll, who's a physicist at CalTech, interested mostly in cosmology, although his interests are incredibly broad. And we get into all sorts of things from details of physics for which he has very intuitive explanations, going farther afield to morality and the meaning of life and that kind of thing. So this was a really fun conversation because I also have a really broad range of interests, as you can tell by the fact that I never stick on one topic for more than a little section of the time. I get a little embarrassed sometimes during this, even though it was one of my favorite conversations, because Sean catches me in a bit of an error sometimes. But I'm going to share it with you anyways, and hopefully we can both learn something. And if you have any comments or questions or criticisms or thoughts, I would love to see them down in the comments, or down in the comments on SoundCloud or iTunes if you're watching it, if you're listening to it there. I want to make a note on how I'm going to be releasing these conversations from now on. I think a lot of people found that releasing them both as an hour-long segment and as those 20-minute blocks was really blowing up your subscription feed, and I had a few people complaining about that. And I think I agree with you. Like, it's too much for me to do both the hour and the 20-minute segments, but I know some people also had commented saying that they don't have time to watch a whole hour and they would really like to see it in little chunks. So for those people, I've made another second channel called Science Life. The link will be right down there. You can go and subscribe to it. And on that channel, I'll be uploading these conversations in more digestible segments. If you only got 15 or 20 minutes at a time, and you still want to consume this kind of thing, please go there. Otherwise, you can keep watching Science Life right here in its full form, or you can subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or listen on SoundCloud. It's all over the place, assuming SoundCloud doesn't go bust in the near future. Anyways, without further ado, here's my conversation with Sean Carroll.
We're the spice. We're the flavor of the universe.
Mystery, harmony. Science Life!
Okay, I'm here with Sean Carroll, who's a physicist at CalTech. He wrote my general relativity textbook. He's written many popular science books on a myriad of subjects, and I think he has a real clarity at explaining things of all sorts. So, without further ado, hi Sean, how's it going?
Well, my singing voice is just terrible. I mean, there's not every talent is equally distributed there.
Well,
it's good to be on, thanks.
There's only so much you can fit into one human brain, I suppose. But you seem to have a broader interest than, like, a broader range of interests than a lot of people do. You sort of branch all over the place with your interests. Have you always been like that?
I think that's right. It's something I've always wanted to do. You know, I never would be happy if I were just doing exactly the same thing over and over and over again. And that means both that I, do science research, but do other things like writing books and playing poker and whatever. But also in the science research that I do, I don't tend to stick to exactly the same kind of problems over and over again. And that there's good aspects and bad aspects about that. You learn new things and therefore maybe bring a different perspective, but also you're not always the world's expert in what you're doing, so there's always a learning curve facing your near future.
Well, you are sort of the world's expert in what you're particularly doing, though. You just seem to branch out into a million other things as well, which I think is...
Well, but I'm not. Right now I'm doing things like quantum information theory and the foundations of quantum mechanics, which I'm not the world's expert in, or non-equilibrium statistical mechanics. So as soon as I become the world's expert in something, I start doing something else. That's the problem.
Do you just get bored with it? Do you find that once you've made a contribution, you have more interesting things you're trying to jump to, or what's going on?
That's part of it. Part of it is our lifespans are very short compared to all the interesting things there are to do in the world. So you have to switch around if you want to cover as many as you can. And another part is I do believe that you stay fresh by trying new things, even though it makes you feel like you're always a graduate student and never a senior faculty member. you can maybe bring new ideas into the field if it's new to you. People get into a rut and do things a certain way, and I want to sort of always be faced with different kinds of challenges, and who knows what's going to happen from that.
Right. That's kind of what I do as well, right? I get just enough information that I feel like I can synthesize it down into a 5-minute segment with videos and things. And then I move on to something else. I think for me, it's really just internal. It's that I'm trying to get a sense of how everything works, right?
Yeah.
And so as long as there are large sort of swaths of the conceptual space that I haven't even mapped out in broad detail, I'm not necessarily interested in going into the little bits and focusing my entire life on one thing. I have this whole section of, say, genomics or economics or whatever else it is, right?
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, when I'm learning about information theory and complexity and things like that, I mean, there's clearly very interesting things going on that I'm not an expert in, but maybe what I do as a theoretical physicist is close enough that I can move in there slowly and gradually rather than just throwing away everything I've already done and starting completely afresh, which is something that I'm not quite courageous enough to actually do.
Right. So this information complexity stuff, is it more related to what you were talking about in your latest book about like complexity as it pertains to life and that kind of side, or is it more of the emergent gravity type things, or what are you applying?
Well, it's a little bit of both. Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the first popular book I wrote, which was From Eternity to Here, about entropy and the arrow of time.
Okay.
I'm not sure how much should I explain about entropy and the arrow of time.
You can give a little summary. I mean, I think probably most people here have seen the one video I did on the subject.
Exactly.
It's 5 minutes
so
long.
What else do they need? But I'll just in case they didn't watch it yet.
Well, that pretty much just sets up the problem. It doesn't really propose any solutions. It's just here's the conundrum.
Yeah. So there's the arrow of time, the fact that the past and the future are different from each other, which is only a problem because that's not built into the laws of physics at a fundamental level. Newton's laws or Schrodinger's equation don't make any distinction between past and future, but the universe clearly does. And physicists explain that by saying that entropy used to be low and is growing. Entropy being a way of talking about the disorderliness, messiness, disorganization of things. So the universe started near the Big Bang 14 billion years ago in a state of very, very low entropy. And the entropy's been going up and will continue to go up for a long time. It's becoming a more and more disorganized universe. So that is something that I've been studying as a cosmologist for a long time. Why is it that the entropy was so low at the beginning? But even if you knew that, there's still many, many questions to be answered about how exactly did you go from that low entropy early point to our current situation, and where will you go into the future? And one aspect of that is, how did complexity arise? How does structure arise in the universe? Or even beyond the fact that entropy increases, how does entropy increase? Exactly in what way does it increase? So I started thinking about that, and it led me to learn more things about statistical mechanics. And there's been a revolution in statistical mechanics in the last 15 or 20 years because we're looking at small systems. If you have Ludwig Boltzmann back in the 1800s showed that you can explain the growth of entropy if you think that matter is made of atoms and particles just rearranging itself into ever more likely configurations. But that's only probably going to happen. If you're down at the level where you have 5 or 6 particles, not 10 to the 25 particles, then sometimes entropy will go down, sometimes it will go up. And we understand that kind of thing a lot better now than we did just 20 years ago. And that might have something to do with why complex structures arise as the universe expands and cools. And of course, life is the paradigmatic, very, very complex structure. So it might even have something to do with the origin of life.
Right. I think there was sort of I had to flip around my understanding of the arrow of time and the second law of thermodynamics, I think, because when I first learned the second law of thermodynamics, it was presented as like a law of, okay, the universe marches forward in time, there's a way that it's going, and then this is something, because the universe marches forward in time and things happen throughout time, they move from states of low entropy to states of high entropy because if they're organized, they won't stay organized. But there's kind of this reversal where it's the fact that they are organized in one direction of time and disorganized in another direction of time that points the arrow, that causes it to be from here to there.
Exactly, that's right. And Boltzmann understood this back in the 1890s anyway, and still a lot of people don't understand this. They really resist the idea that the reason why time seems to flow in one direction, the reason why we all remember the past but don't remember the future, it's all because entropy is increasing. And Boltzmann did fool himself a little bit. He thought he explained why entropy was increasing. What he really explained was why entropy increases from today to tomorrow. What he never was able to explain is why it is higher today than it was yesterday.
Right.
And that's ultimately a cosmology question. You got to go back to the Big Bang.
Right. The reason it was higher yesterday was that it was even higher the day before.
Even lower the day before, yes.
Even lower the day before, yes.
That's exactly right, and it goes back 14 billion years to the Big Bang. And of course, Boltzmann didn't know about the Big Bang. He was talking in the 1890s. Big Bang didn't really settle into something we believed in until the 1920s at the earliest.
Can you explain your pet theory about baby universes springing off and forming ever increasing entropy in sort of this multiverse? Because I think I touched on that in about one line in the song. That was all I had time for. I feel like that doesn't quite do it justice.
Maybe there'll be a sequel song or something like that, a follow-up. But
if you explain it well enough that I get it.
Yeah, I think it's an idea I had with a graduate student I was working with at the time, Jennifer Chen, back in 2004. And the setup is the following. If what you're trying to explain is why the universe ever had a low entropy. And people have tried to explain this in many, many ways. But the problem is, any way you do it, there's always more ways for the universe to be high entropy than to be low entropy. So if you don't simply set a condition, just make it a law of nature that the universe started with low entropy, if you want to explain it dynamically, it's very, very hard. But you can ask yourself, what does high entropy look like? And the answer is, well, it's where the universe is going. The universe is emptying out, right? In Einstein's universe, where space can expand, the highest entropy state is the state with no stuff, with all the stuff in the universe scattered to the four winds. So you're left with nothing but empty space. And you say, how in the world can that make a universe? Can that lead to something like our Big Bang? So the answer we suggested are these baby universes, the idea that there can be a quantum fluctuation of space-time itself that takes this big empty universe and in a little tiny region pinches off a little bubble. And almost always when that happens, the bubble just recollapses and no one will notice anything. But occasionally, if conditions are just right, that bubble can expand and grow into its own universe, completely disconnected from ours. And the idea is that the easiest bubbles to make are the smallest ones. And when you combine the fact that the bubble is small with the fact that it has to be just right in order to expand and make a universe, it means that it's going to be very, very low entropy. Okay. So the whole shebang, the pre-existing empty universe, plus all the baby universes, is a system where entropy keeps going up, even though the particular place that our baby universe starts with is a low entropy condition, hopefully like our Big Bang.
I think the thing that I'm confused about with this theory, and maybe it's just something that isn't understood well enough, but the information question seems really strange to me. So how do you pinch off a microscopic bubble from a parent universe and have enough quantum information in that bubble to expand into an entire universe full of particles and space and entropy flying all around? Is that understood at all, or would we need some sort of theory of how much information is in space to even get there?
Well, we think that it's like we think we have the broad outlines of the understanding. It's a wonderful feature of quantum mechanics. When you say that the early universe, forget about baby universes and the multiverse and all the complicated stuff. Just take our actual universe, right? The one that we think we live in started out with low entropy. What that means is that the quantum state of that universe was very, very particular. It was very, very special. It's there's not that many states that look that way.
Right.
And today we have a lot of entropy, which means there's many, many states that look the way our universe looks today. So you ask yourself, well, how did that one little simple thing turn into this thing that has all this information in it? Where did the information come from? And the answer in the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics is because the wave function of the universe branched. When we started at early times, we had a very simple, uniform, unified wave function of the universe, and then it splits every time some quantum mechanical interaction happens. And so this is what we call the branching of the wave function. If you observe a particle that's spinning clockwise or counterclockwise, You get one universe where it was spinning clockwise and you saw it spinning clockwise, another universe where it was spinning counterclockwise and you saw it spinning counterclockwise. So this happens whether you like it or not. You don't need people or conscious observers to make this happen. Anytime different quantum systems interact with each other and entangle with each other, this is going to happen. So basically, the universe starts very simple, but it differentiates over time. It branches into many, many different things, and the individual pieces can be very complex and carry a lot of information, even though the whole shebang is actually a very simple thing if you knew how to put it back together.
Okay. Yeah, I think my question was, and maybe I'll explain this a little bit to the listeners, there's this idea in quantum mechanics that what really constitutes the universe is not so much a physical space as this mathematical Hilbert space, right? So you've got all these, the universe, everything in the universe can be characterized by a set of vectors in a very complex, multidimensional, perhaps infinitely dimensional, at least very high dimensional vector space.
In fact, and just by one vector.
Yeah, by a single vector, if it's a pure state, in a single vector that basically just stays there. It doesn't really do anything. When you try to measure things that have to do with particular properties you're only thinking about a subset of that space, it'll rotate around in a strange way that gives you the appearance of observables moving around and changing. But the Hilbert space itself stays pretty much fixed, and the vector itself stays pretty much fixed. So I think my question is, can a very small universe have a large enough Hilbert space to blow up into the Hilbert space that now constitutes our present universe?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. There's no problem with that at all, because Hilbert space isn't changing. Hilbert space is the space of possibilities. Okay. When you say the universe is very, very low entropy, you mean it's in a very, very particular part of that space of possibilities. But I mean, you said that the wave function doesn't evolve over time. That's possible, but it's not at all settled. In fact, I think it's equally likely the wave function does evolve over time.
Okay.
There's this argument we have about whether or not time itself is fundamental or emergent, which is a great argument to have. But I think it's okay for our current purposes to imagine that time is real, it's really fundamental, the universe is really evolving, which means that that wave function of the universe moves from the very simple low entropy region of Hilbert space to the more complicated looking regions of Hilbert space. So it starts where there's only one branch and everything always looks simple. It moves to a place where there are many, many, many branches, and on every branch things look complicated. But secretly there's a relationship between all those branches, namely that if you went backward, everything would simplify as time went on.